On the morning of July 7, a construction crew working for a water and sewer line company was involved in an incident that tragically highlighted the importance of OSHA's confined space safety protocols. At around 11 a.m., workers were attempting to remove a 24-inch rubber plug from a sewer pipe located within a 24-foot deep wet well. The crew first attempted to pull the plug using an attached nylon rope, but due to pressure caused by wastewater entering the well, the plug was wedged tightly into a T-shaped fitting. Without performing any atmospheric testing, one employee climbed down into the well with a crowbar to manually dislodge the plug, unaware of potentially hazardous gases that could be present. After struggling to remove the plug, the employee attempted to climb back up the ladder just 2 feet from the surface. However, the worker lost consciousness and fell back into the well. Recognizing the emergency, a second employee descended the ladder to help but also lost consciousness upon entering the space. A third employee also attempted a rescue, but this worker lost consciousness as well. All 3 workers tragically died due to asphyxiation from hydrogen sulfide gas, which had accumulated in the confined space. OSHA's investigation into the incident uncovered multiple serious safety violations, many of which underscored the importance of adhering to confined space entry protocols designed to protect workers from atmospheric and physical hazards. The employer failed to designate a competent person to identify, evaluate, and test confined spaces on site. A competent person could have recognized the permit-required confined space, assessed potential hazards, and ensured that it was safe before allowing workers to enter. OSHA also found that the employer did not evaluate potential hazards within the confined space before allowing workers to enter. Had this evaluation been conducted, the employer might have identified the potential presence of hydrogen sulfide gas and other atmospheric hazards in the wet well. Additionally, the wet well's opening, measuring nearly 8 feet by 6 feet, was left unguarded, exposing workers to a serious fall risk. OSHA fall protection standards require employers to secure confined space openings with guardrails or temporary barriers to prevent such falls. Under federal law, employers must test for breathable oxygen levels, flammable gases, and potential toxic contaminants before allowing employees to enter a confined space. However, in this case, the employer failed to conduct any such testing. As a result, the workers were exposed to lethal levels of hydrogen sulfide gas without any warning. OSHA also requires employers to purge, inert, flush, or vent confined spaces to remove or control atmospheric hazards. No such measures were taken to address the presence of hydrogen sulfide, contributing directly to the workers' exposure to lethal concentrations of the gas in the well's hazardous atmosphere. Employers must also ensure that emergency rescue equipment is readily available when employees are working in confined spaces. OSHA found that the company failed to have any such equipment on hand, violating federal safety requirements. Without this equipment, the workers' colleagues could not effectively attempt a safe rescue. OSHA also requires employers to develop written protocols for emergency rescue, medical treatment, and protection from unauthorized rescue attempts. In this case, no such protocols were in place, leading to an unplanned rescue attempt by untrained personnel, which ultimately resulted in further needless fatalities. Importantly, an entry permit detailing compliance with OSHA's confined space requirements should have been prepared before entry. The lack of a documented permit violated federal OSHA safety standards and underscored the absence of systematic hazard identification and control. The employer also failed to provide the necessary confined space safety training to help workers understand the risks and proper protocols associated with entering confined spaces. Without this training, employees remained unaware of the hazards of confined space entry and the measures necessary to mitigate them. Finally, OSHA cited the employer for failing to provide training specific to each worker's role in confined space entry, including the responsibilities of entrants, attendants, and supervisors. This lack of role-specific training left employees ill-prepared to safely manage confined space work or respond effectively in an emergency. This tragic case serves as a critical reminder of the essential nature of OSHA's confined space safety requirements in the construction industry. Proper planning, atmospheric testing, effective training, and the use of rescue equipment are vital to preventing fatal incidents in confined spaces. Employers must take these precautions seriously to protect their workers and avoid preventable tragedies like this one. On July 29, at 9:25 a.m., 2 employees at a landscaping company were preparing to begin a hydroseeding project on a high school football field. The team was using a hydroseeding truck, which included a large tank designed to mix and spray seed, water, and fertilizers. Before starting, one worker opened the tank hatch to visually inspect the auger system for any clogs. While doing so, the worker lost their footing, slipped, and fell into the tank, where they were quickly overcome by fertilizer fumes accumulating inside the enclosed space. Another employee heard the workers cry for help, immediately climbed to the top of the vehicle, and entered the tank to rescue the trapped worker. Tragically, the second employee was also quickly overwhelmed by the vapors. Both workers died of asphyxiation from the hazardous atmosphere inside the tank. After the incident, OSHA conducted an investigation and issued a citation to the employer for a serious safety violation, highlighting the need for proper hazard assessment and respiratory protection in confined spaces. OSHA's investigation revealed that the employer had not identified or evaluated the respiratory hazards associated with the hydroseeding tank. Federal OSHA safety standards require employers to assess potential respiratory hazards and provide adequate protection to workers, especially in confined spaces where hazardous atmospheres may accumulate. The employer's failure to recognize the tank as a confined space and evaluate the risks of deadly fumes led directly to the tragic loss of both workers. The absence of a confined space assessment meant that the employees entered an enclosed area with potentially toxic and oxygen-depleted air without any respiratory protection or monitoring equipment to warn them of dangerous gas levels. The employer's failure to provide adequate protective measures, such as atmospheric testing, ventilation, or respiratory protection, exposed both employees to fatal respiratory hazards. This incident highlights the critical importance of confined space hazard evaluations, especially in tanks and enclosed areas where vapors or fumes can collect. Employers must carefully assess confined spaces, test for hazardous atmospheres, and provide appropriate respiratory protection and rescue protocols to prevent tragedies. OSHA standards for confined space entry exist to protect workers from unforeseen hazards, and strict adherence is essential to maintaining a safe work environment. On July 8, at 2:23 p.m., a tragic incident occurred involving an employee working for a utilities construction company. The worker was tasked with inspecting a water main valve inside an underground vault, a confined space that required careful atmospheric monitoring. During the inspection, the employee unexpectedly lost consciousness and collapsed inside the vault. Due to a critically low oxygen level in the confined space, the worker asphyxiated before anyone could provide emergency medical assistance. Following the incident, OSHA conducted a thorough investigation, uncovering multiple safety violations, each underscoring essential requirements for confined space safety. These violations illustrated gaps in the company's approach to confined space entry, specifically in the areas of hazard evaluation, ventilation, and training. OSHA requires employers to designate a competent person capable of identifying and assessing all confined spaces in the workplace. In this case, the employer had not assigned anyone to evaluate and monitor the underground vault, a critical omission. This lapse meant that confined space hazards like low oxygen levels were not identified or addressed prior to entry, leading to a preventable tragedy. The employer also had not conducted atmospheric testing for oxygen levels, toxic gases, or other potential hazards before allowing the worker to enter the vault. OSHA requires thorough pre-entry testing to confirm the safety of confined spaces. The lack of testing meant that the dangerously low oxygen levels went undetected, putting the employee at fatal risk. Additionally, the employer allowed the worker to enter the vault even though the oxygen levels measured between 12 and 16%, far below the safe minimum of 19.5%. OSHA prohibits entry into confined spaces with oxygen-deficient atmospheres without adequate respiratory protection. Allowing the employee to enter under these conditions exposed them to severe respiratory hazards and ultimately led to their death. Entering the vault's hazardous atmosphere safely would have required continuous forced air ventilation, which the employer failed to provide. According to OSHA's safety standards, employers must ensure sufficient ventilation to maintain safe air quality levels in confined spaces with known atmospheric hazards. Without ventilation, the oxygen-poor environment within the vault became lethal. OSHA found that the employer had not provided adequate confined space safety training. Under federal law, all employees entering confined spaces must receive training to understand the specific hazards and how to mitigate them. This training is essential for recognizing risks, ensuring the correct safety measures, and making informed decisions. The absence of this training left the employee unprepared and unaware of the dangers within the vault. Lastly, according to OSHA, employers must report any workplace fatality to OSHA within 8 hours. In this case, the employer failed to meet this requirement, delaying the notification and obstructing OSHA's timely response and investigation. This tragic case underscores the critical role of OSHA's confined space safety requirements in preventing workplace fatalities. Employers must ensure that all confined spaces are identified, thoroughly evaluated, and continuously monitored. Effective atmospheric testing, appropriate ventilation, and robust training are all essential to protect employees working in potentially hazardous environments. Additionally, prompt reporting of incidents is crucial for compliance and accountability.